Hey Mario,
Hi, how's it going?
good. My name's Adam. I'm from Inspire Magazine, and I'm going to be conducting the interview today. How are you?
I'm doing quite well, Adam. Thank you for your time this afternoon. I'm really excited to meet and chat with you.
Yeah, me too. So we at Inspire seek to elevate stories of people doing positive things for themselves and their communities. And so your story and work seem a perfect fit for our publication. Um, And I am particularly interested in a couple aspects of your speaking engagements. So, my first question is uh, your story and work focus a lot on overcoming life's challenges and being your best self, stemming from your story of going blind at a young age. I'm curious how you define disability and how you would define thriving.
That is a fantastic question. Um, I have been a person who I typically don't like the word disability.
Mhm.
Um, I tend to believe that my disability is more so a minor inconvenience as opposed to a setback. That's the way that I have always personally defined it for myself, that it's a minor inconvenience, not a setback. And what I would define as someone thriving is being able to function and still go for what you want in life, despite the fact that you're facing what I consider to be a minor inconvenience. Now, I will say that, of course, it took some climbing to get to that frame of mind.
Mhm.
But once I did get to that frame of mind, that's how I was able to, obviously function and go after all of the things that I did want in life, whether it would be overcoming adversity or trying to beat the bad statistics for blind people being unemployed in this country, or you name it. So thriving is being able to rise above your situation and not use it as something to define you negatively. And people would argue that, oh my goodness, blindness. How could you maintain hope? How could you have a good smile despite the fact that you're blind? But that's the crux of thriving, despite that. There's that word, despite. So
Yeah, that's great. Thriving is despite. I love that. You talk a lot about choosing to overcome adversity. I'm I'm wondering if you would speak more
yes,
about the choice and how one can choose to overcome adversity.
that's a great question. Um, so choosing to overcome adversity. So when I originally went blind, I went blind at age 9. I first went blind at age 5, and my right eye, and then my left eye lost the vision in my in age 9. I lost the vision in my left eye.
Mhm.
So in being in a situation where I was homeless, abused, abandoned by my father, going blind happened against the backdrop of all of that stuff. So I had a lot of reasons to rebel and not to care about things. In fact, the first 3 years after going blind, I did rebel. I didn't want to learn Braille. I didn't want to use a cane. I hated everything that represented being blind. I hated anyone who had a father because I didn't. And I was, jealous and obviously going through the same self-esteem issues. So I think, the choice comes to where if you're awake enough, saying that being miserable or feeling sad about this situation doesn't make me feel good. And I realize that it takes more energy to wallow in sorrow than it does to keep hoping. And so one of my favorite phrases is always keep hope alive. So to keep hope obviously made me feel better. And then I don't want to take from the story. Meeting people, having an excellent support network, and having people as examples and people who are kind of showing you the way. I had a lot of people who didn't let me use blindness as an excuse to fail. And the fact that as a kid, my family was living in motels and we were living in cars and different things like that, hard people in a good support network said that you're not going to use these as reasons why you're going to become, theoretically a blind black statistic. So those are the two things. It's the personal drive, but then also hopefully that a person is aligned with people who mean them well, to kind of show them that a different trajectory is possible by choice.
Yeah, wow. So individual and communal kind of support for your own project
Absolutely.
to grow.
Absolutely.
Great. Um, so even though you've gone to this place where you're in your thriving through the adversity, we all have rough days, right? And I'm curious, with your work being so about being a beacon of hope for people who maybe don't have the strength or haven't realized where they're going yet, to be their best selves. Uh, how do you stay positive and motivated even on your rough days?
So I look at it like this: I would not be human if I didn't go to what I call the momentary corner of depression, right?
Mhm.
Especially when we consider the type of world that we live in now, with post pandemic and the racial unrest and what have you. There's a lot of things to feel sad about.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things to be depressed about. And then even within my own corner, and how I grew up. I mean, like I said, what I went through, it sort of runs the gamut, from whether it's being abused, molested, abandoned, or even going blind, uh, and having to learn through trial and error how to be happy in my own skin. One of the things I do is I recognize that as a human, that I'm going to have those days, and I do go through those days where I do feel, even now, occasionally I feel sorry for myself, or God, things would be so much easier if I could see. Or it could be something as mundane as my 10-year-old kid trying to get over on me or something. And all of a sudden that will plunge me into a momentary thing of, oh my God, my kid tried to take advantage of my blindness, which is normal stuff. But the way I feel is, it's okay to go to those corners, but we can't stay there. So as a person who's been, blessed to be a beacon of hope for other people, I've had to find ways to make sure that I can rebuild, and one of the ways, rebuild, refuel, etc. And one of the ways that I do that is I always write poetry if I start feeling down. That's one of the things I always do. And then after that, I'll write a song, or I'll listen to music, because it might sound a little corny, but I'm people that believe music has healing powers, and it heals me every single time. So that's one of the things that I use to get through.
Yeah, I mean, that's the right perspective. If you're a musician too, like it's gotta have those healing powers, like um,
Yeah.
both singing and also writing. I think that's great. Your poetry, is that do your poems often become your songs, or is there a lot of
It's
transition
funny,
between phases?
they do. So my poems do normally become songs, or sometimes um, uh, a song will be birthed out of a theme related to something that's happened in my life. Like even the anti-bullying song that we're kind of dealing with right now, called Human, that was birthed out of the whole experience of being bullied. And it literally, despite the fact that I was speaking, and despite the fact that I'm inspirational, it really took until about age 30, um, for me to really embrace every single part of me, regardless of whether I can see it or not, and really enjoy living in the human house that's Mario Bonds.
Your song "Human," uh, it, the lyrics seem to imply like an ongoing struggle of dehumanization. Um,
Hmm.
and I think sometimes people don't conceptualize bullying as dehumanization. And it seems that you might, and I would agree. I'm wondering if you could tell me more about the writing process of that song and making the beautiful video.
Absolutely, that's a great question. So one of the things about bullying, and the fact that people don't appreciate it as it sometimes, especially the bully, may not see it as a dehumanizing experience. I want to qualify first, obviously, why it is. Because anytime you make someone feel less than for something about themselves that's out of their control, you're robbing them of the dignity of their own human experience. So I'm 33 years old, at this point, it tickles me to death that I'm left or right. I'm humbled that by most of the time I'm praised by people and them calling me so-called beautiful or very handsome or what have you. But growing up, everything that people praise about me now was a negative thing against me.
Mm.
So being chocolate, or being dark skinned, in both in the Black community and out of the Black community, I was bullied for that. As I was losing my vision, whether it was me wearing big glasses first, to the point where I stopped wearing glasses, and a lot of times my eyes would seem like they're cross-eyed or facing the ceiling. Being bullied for that. Um, Everything. Being bullied for having a big butt. Being bullied by girls. So that for much of my teenage life, I used to hate to walk in front of people. There was a lot of stuff, right? So that again, that making someone feel less than, especially, being bullied for being homeless, making someone feel less than for something that's out of their control. I didn't ask to go blind. I didn't ask to be chocolate. I didn't ask to be 5'9". So that's the dehumanizing experience, is the hatred point of it for something that you control. You're less than me because of that attribute about you when it's completely out of your control. So that's the dehumanizing experience of it. The writing process of the song is, again, whenever I get down, I have to do something that's cathartic.
Yeah.
And in my head, I'm thinking, what would be the greatest message, whether it's someone facing racism or whether it's someone facing anti-bullying, or whether it's someone being mistreated because of their sexuality. It's like, what is the greatest message that if I could talk to my bullies right in the face, what is the biggest message I would want them to hear? And, the imagery and the lines of, um, dare to take my hand, take a seat with me, and feel I'm human and I belong here. That line, I belong here, is speaking to the pieces of that, hey, I'm human, I belong here. And then really quickly, in the lane of what would I want to say to a bully or anyone who has discriminated against me. I'm human too, and I bleed just like you. I have feelings and dreams and a heart that does beat. But the biggest, the most passionate part of that for me is sometimes I get scared and my eyes do cry tears, but you could dry my eyes if you act like I'm human and see me as human too. That was the crux of the writing process for that song.
Yeah.
And
So
then interestingly, yeah, go ahead.
I said, so not just staking a claim on space, but also saying like, you as the bully need to recognize my humanity
Absolutely,
and make space for me.
absolutely,
Mm.
absolutely, and make a space for me. And if because I am blind, right? So the imagery is there. It says, you know, so the first part going into the imagery of feeling I'm human is, so close your eyes and dare to take my hand, take a seat with me and feel I'm human. Because, and by closing your eyes, you feel, in terms of the imagery, I have fingers just like you do. Skin is skin. Feel I'm human. Um, that's what speaks to me. And then it was really weird. I sat down and it took me some time because I'm blind, right? So I sat down and wrote a video treatment for it in terms of what I wanted things to happen. And it's like, oh my goodness, because I am blind, I'm not going to be able to know whether it visually comes out the way I want it. But then I found an incredible person named Thomas Bloom who literally brought the mental vision of a blind person literally to life, to where it got the response that I needed to get in terms of helping people. And my nephew got to play me as a kid, so because he interestingly looks just like me when I was a teenager, and my adopted sons got to play the bullies in the video, and all that type of stuff. So it became a family affair to really put together something that obviously was personal, but would be meaningful for anyone who has ever felt dehumanized. And I think we all have at some point felt some token of that.
Yeah, I mean that must be really empowering too to be able to include your family in such a important message and in showing that kind of
Yeah,
solidarity. We need to be together.
kicking and screaming. My teenage sons were brought into it.
Okay.
No, they loved it.
Yeah.
They loved it.
Did they memorize lines? I'm just curious. Was there really scripted, or was it kind of ad lib in the
So
beginning?
the only person who got lucky enough to get lines is actually the 10-year-old that I talked about. He's 10 going on 50. So when I say he tries to get over on his blind dad, it's like, you can't sneak around, dude, and expect I don't know what you're doing. But he was 8 at the time we filmed it, and he had to memorize lines. He had my lines memorized. I was messing up and he wasn't. And so I always joke with people and say, he's at the beginning of the video. I always say his name is Mikai. I always say, well, Mikai is the reason why the video is good.
Well,
Yeah, he's an
definitely,
adorable
he's
kid.
part of why. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it was great. So the song "Human" also bridging that gap between individualism and community, and I'm curious how you make that balance, because in previous speeches I've seen you've talked about how and even today, that you didn't want to be a government statistic. You wanted to be self-sufficient and not have to rely on others. And I imagine that sometimes that can feel isolating. So how do you maintain that
Right.
balance with the people around you?
So I think I maintain the balance by making sure that others know how to respect me in the context of my disability. So I'm really good with setting boundary in terms of, hey, please allow me to let you know if I need help, as opposed to forcing it on me. And this is a collective theme that everyone in the blind community talks about. I just did a program with Jubilee where they were where all blind people think the same. And one of the things that came up is how, as blind individuals or disabled individuals, regardless of your disability, one of the things that we would love is to be in a position where we can solicit assistance or help when it's needed. And so that theme is transferable to even what we're talking about here, is that I always maintain the balance by always self advocate for myself, and letting people know what I need and what I don't need, and hope that that theoretically is enough. I reach out. I love talking. So as a self advocate, I reach out if I definitely need that help, for that bridge to be sort of gapped, for the gap to be bridged between, individualism and what I might need from the community. But again, it goes back to my earlier point. It goes back to, ensuring that people, sort of give you that type of respect.
Mm. So gaining respect with your self-sufficiency, and also being empowered to know that you are going to ask for help when you need it or want it, but that people shouldn't impose.
Yes.
Gotcha. All right. I want to ask you a kind of hard
Yes.
question. Um, we've been talking a little bit
Yes.
about the pandemic, and I think a lot of us are experiencing new levels of hardship, and some more than others. Um, During the pandemic, where some people with disabilities have a higher risk of infection or severe illness based on part of their symptoms, and where Black Americans are more than 2 times more likely to contract and die from COVID than white Americans. And these are both CDC statistics. Your story is, I think, needed now more than ever. And I'm
Yes.
wondering what you would say about the US and its response to the pandemic. And if you have anything you want to say to Americans, particularly Black Americans and Americans with disabilities, on how to get through this tough time emotionally.
So my heart obviously remains heavy, as everyone else's hearts does, especially with the type of response that we have had to the pandemic. I think it's rather unfortunate that the pandemic, that we're in a situation where it took a pandemic like this to pull the veil, back on something that has always been an institutional issue, and that being obviously disparities in the Black community when we talk about health, access to health services, and even access to healthy foods. If I go to a grocery store in a Black community, a lot of times you're looking at a situation where there's a higher amount of processed foods than, say, would be in the same grocery store elsewhere.
Mm.
Um, and so one of the things that I look at is in the Black community with the prevalence of obesity, high blood pressure, diabetes. We're in a situation where obviously COVID exacerbates all of those type of conditions. And again, all of those conditions are prevalent in the Black community for some of the reasons I've listed: lack of access to better services, lack of access to good food. So it's one of those things that obviously there's an economic piece behind it as well. But this takes me to the U.S. response. It's not enough to know that that Blacks are obviously 2 times more likely to contract it or 2 times more likely to die from it. What's the answer to the systemic and institutional issue around those disparities for the Black community? What is the U.S. doing? And ideally, that's my way of saying the U.S. should do more to put things in place so that we can start tearing down the division, obviously, and tearing down the issues that stand in the way of Blacks being able to lead healthier lives. That's one of the things that, unfortunately, that's the painful truth of it all. Why does COVID kill Blacks more than others, minorities more than others? Well, from a sociological perspective, look at the diseases, look at the way of life that affects that community. And so for Americans, and especially Americans with disabilities, with me being blind, it terrifies me sometimes when I do have to travel, because if I don't leave with a family member, it's virtually impossible for me to social distance if I end up needing help to be guided by someone,
Mm.
so to speak. That's one of the things I think about, when I go to get in a Lyft or go to get in an Uber and that sorts of thing. I have to make extra precautions now to make sure I'm not in a situation where strangers have to assist me. And when I go to the doctors, it's not always possible. So one of the things I would say to all Americans and persons with disabilities is that I believe, this is my firm belief, I believe 2 things: that barriers only exist when we choose to acknowledge them. So for the Black community, I hope that even with the racial unrest and trying to get to equality and a better situation for us, stay in a situation where you don't see barriers, because that's the only way that we can absolutely make change. And number 2, the last thing I would say is giving up is not an option. It is very scary out here. Sometimes I feel like giving up too, but giving up is not an option, and that's something that I tell myself every day. Especially in this situation, I have 4 kids, and when this pandemic hit, of course, everybody's thinking apocalyptically and wondering when the next horror is coming around the corner. As a blind father, I went out and bought a shotgun to make sure I could protect my children because you don't know what's coming and all that stuff. But
Mm.
I tell myself that giving up is not an option. And when you take that off the table and keep telling yourself that every day, then that'll stop you from going so low, where a lot of people do check out. That's what I would say.
Thank you. That's very nice and helpful, I think. Mantras are good. Giving up is not an option.
Yes, it's not, because it just means I I um I look at the kids that I'm taking care of. Um, I look at myself and I say, my goodness, to go this far of a journey and just to give up, what would that look like for you? So I mean, I say it to myself so many times that, again, it's not an option, so much so that if I say it to myself enough, when times get tough or tougher than they are now, I can make sure that my brain doesn't say, you know what? Let's give up. It's like, no, brain, you've been wired to not consider that one. So giving up is not an option. You've heard it enough.
Good.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I have one last question. I want to end it on a positive note,
Sure.
and I want to hear what excites you about the future. What are you looking forward to right now?
Wow, that is a great question. Hmm. What am I looking for? Goodness, I'm looking forward to. I've sort of repurposed my life and making sure that I spend more meaningful time, spend meaningful time with my kids.
Hmm.
I have an 8, a 10, a 16, and an 18-year-old. Um, all adopted. And right now, my 8 and 10-year-old, even though I'm a blind father, they think I'm the coolest thing in the world. Or my 16 and 18-year-old thinks I don't know anything. But but my 8 and 10-year-old, they think I'm the coolest in the world. And so they don't play a lot of video games. They always want to play with me or always want to be with me. And I chase them just like any other parent would do. So two things. I hate being away from the house because I hate being away from my kids because I love them that much. So I'm looking forward to that. And also, I'm looking forward to releasing an album in March of 2021.
Wow. Any hints that we can get on a title or some content?
Oh, of course, yes. One of the songs that I'm really excited about on the album is called "My Eyes, My Life,"
Mhm.
and that's another autobiographical song that it doesn't really talk about me being blind. But one of the lines in the song, it says, "In my mind are visions of a different time where we don't have to hurt or cry. I know this can be true. Tell me, how about you? In my mind, a place where we don't need to hide, a place where you will one day find you don't have to be so blind. Take a look into my eyes." And so it's one of those imagery based songs that is inviting everyone to take a look into the reality of other people so that you can hopefully develop some sort of empathy and we can stop all of this hatred. um, so I'm really excited about that song. It's almost it's pretty much on the level of human. And I've got a actually one of my friends who's currently on The Voice, Tamara Fingal, does the background for it. So I'm really excited about it.
Great. Yeah. Well, I'll be looking forward to hearing it when it comes out. And I wish you all the best of luck with that. Thank
You.
you so much for joining me for this interview. It's been really great to talk to you.
No, thank you for your time. Thank you for your time, Adam. I really appreciate this. So have a great day.
You too. Take care.